The ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a blade cutting through silk. Ambassador Kira Velthani stood at the observation window, watching the blue planet grow larger with each passing moment. She had seen 1,000 worlds in her 300 years of life, but this one felt different. This one would change everything. The Sirith Dominion had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered empires, crushed rebellions, and built monuments that would outlast stars. Humans had barely learned to travel between planets when the Sirith were already ancient. To Kira's people, humanity was a child species, loud and clumsy and far too confident for their own good. But children grew up, and sometimes they grew up faster than anyone expected. The Vorn Collective was pushing against Sirith borders. The war had lasted 2 centuries, and the Dominion was tired. They needed allies. Even humans. Kira's mission was simple. She would marry a human of suitable rank, binding the 2 species together in a political union that would guarantee military cooperation. It was an old tradition, one the Sirith had used countless times before. Marriage meant nothing to her people beyond contract and obligation. Love was a luxury that ambassadors could not afford. She expected to meet a general, perhaps an admiral, someone with medals on their chest and fire in their eyes. Someone the Sirith Council could respect, even if they would never admit it. Instead, she met Nathan Cole. He was waiting for her in the reception hall when she arrived. The room was filled with important humans in expensive clothes, all of them talking too loudly and drinking too much. Politicians, military leaders, corporate executives. They all wanted something from the Sirith, and they were not shy about showing it. He wore a simple uniform without decoration. His brown hair was cut short, and his face carried the weathered look of someone who had spent years working under harsh lights in cramped spaces. He was not handsome in the way humans measured such things, but there was something calm about him, something steady. When Kira approached, he bowed in the Sirith fashion. Not perfectly, but close enough to show that he had practiced. "Ambassador Velthani," he said, "I am Nathan Cole. I have been assigned as your diplomatic partner." Kira studied him. Her training allowed her to read micro-expressions, body temperature, even the chemical signatures that humans gave off when they lied. She found nothing remarkable. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a middle-ranking logistics officer with no notable achievements and no apparent ambition. "There must be some mistake," she said. "I was told I would meet someone of significant military standing." Nathan nodded, as if he had expected this response. "I understand your concern. The Coalition believes that my skills are well suited to this assignment. But if you wish to file a complaint, I can provide the appropriate channels." He said it without defensiveness, without embarrassment. He simply stated facts and waited for her decision. Kira looked past him at the generals and admirals who filled the room. They were watching her, some with curiosity, others with barely hidden contempt. They had given her the least valuable human they could find, a message, a reminder that humanity did not need the Sirith as much as the Sirith needed them. She should have been angry. Instead, she felt tired. "That will not be necessary," she said. "I accept the arrangement." The wedding ceremony took place 1 week later. It was a human custom, though the Sirith had added their own rituals. Blood was exchanged. Vows were spoken in 3 languages. Kira wore white, as humans did, and Nathan wore a dark suit that made him look like a servant at his own wedding. The reception was louder than anything Kira had ever experienced. Humans celebrated with music and dancing and alcohol. They touched each other constantly, laughing at jokes she did not understand. It was chaotic and overwhelming, and strangely beautiful. Nathan stayed by her side throughout. He explained the customs she did not recognize. He translated the jokes that did not survive the language barrier. He fetched her drinks that would not poison her Sirith biology, and kept away the politicians who wanted favors. When the night finally ended, they retired to their assigned quarters. The room was large by human standards, small by Sirith ones. Two beds had been arranged on opposite sides, a compromise that satisfied neither culture entirely. "You do not have to stay," Kira said. "The ceremony is complete. Our obligations are fulfilled for the night." Nathan sat on the edge of his bed and removed his shoes. "Where would I go?" he asked. "Anywhere. I understand that human males often seek companionship after celebrations like this. I will not object." He looked at her with an expression she could not read. "Is that what you want?" The question surprised her. No one had asked what she wanted since she received her orders. "I want to understand why they chose you," she admitted. "You are not a warrior. You have no political connections. You bring nothing to this alliance that I can see. So why are you here?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city glowed with a million lights. Ships crossed the sky like fireflies, carrying cargo and passengers to destinations unknown. "I spent 15 years managing supply chains for frontier colonies," he said. "Do you know what that means?" "It means I know how to keep people alive when everything is trying to kill them. Bad weather, equipment failures, pirates, bureaucrats who lose paperwork at the worst possible moment. I have solved problems that would make generals weep." He turned to face her. "The Coalition did not send me because they respect me. They sent me because they do not understand what I do. Supply lines are invisible until they break. Then suddenly, everyone cares. But by then, it is usually too late." Kira considered his words. Among the Sirith, logistics was handled by the lowest castes. Warriors received glory. Administrators received power. The people who moved food and ammunition received nothing but contempt. Perhaps humans were the same. "And what do you expect from this marriage?" she asked. "I expect to learn," Nathan said simply. "Your people have managed an empire for 10,000 years. That does not happen by accident. Someone, somewhere, is very good at solving problems. I want to know how." It was not the answer she expected. Humans usually wanted wealth, or status, or pleasure. Nathan wanted knowledge, understanding. Kira lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling. "You are a strange human, Nathan Cole." "Yes," he agreed. "But strange is sometimes useful." She did not respond. But for the first time since receiving her assignment, she wondered if perhaps the Coalition had not made a mistake after all. Perhaps they had made a choice that no one else understood yet. 6 months passed faster than Kira expected. She had imagined her marriage would be a prison of awkward silences and political obligations. Instead, it became something else entirely, something she did not have a word for. Nathan never demanded anything from her. He woke early each morning and studied Sireth language files until his pronunciation no longer made her wince. He memorized the names of every servant, every guard, every minor official who crossed their path. He asked questions that seemed foolish at first, but revealed deep thinking when she considered them later. At diplomatic functions, he stood quietly beside her. He let her speak. He let her lead. The Sireth nobles who visited their quarters dismissed him as a servant playing husband. They spoke freely in front of him, assuming he could not understand. They were wrong. Nathan understood everything. He simply chose not to respond. He collected information, like a merchant collected coins, storing it away for future use. Kira began to watch him more carefully. She noticed how he tracked conversations across crowded rooms. She noticed how he remembered details that others forgot. She noticed how he never, ever raised his voice or lost his temper. "You are not what you pretend to be," she told him one evening. Nathan looked up from his reading tablet. "I am exactly what I pretend to be. I am just more than that as well." Before she could respond, an alert sounded through the station. Emergency frequencies, military codes. Kira accessed the communication network with a gesture. Her blood turned cold as she read the reports. A Syreth border colony had been attacked. 30,000 dead. The entire defense fleet destroyed. The attackers had vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Dominion blamed the Vorn Collective. Tensions that had simmered for years suddenly boiled over. Within hours, both sides were preparing for war. Kira was recalled to the Sirith homeworld immediately. As her husband, Nathan was required to accompany her. He packed his belongings without complaint and followed her onto the transport ship. The journey took 3 weeks. Kira spent most of that time in communication with the High Council, arguing for patience, for investigation, for anything other than immediate retaliation. The Council ignored her. They wanted blood. They wanted revenge. Nathan spent the journey reading. He accessed every archive he could find about Sirith military history, border conflicts, supply routes, and communication networks. He filled tablet after tablet with notes that made no sense to anyone but himself. When they arrived at the homeworld, Kira was summoned to endless council sessions. Nathan was not welcome. He was human. He was unimportant. He was told to wait in their assigned quarters like a well-behaved pet. Instead, he wandered. The palace complex was ancient and vast. Most humans would have been lost within minutes. Nathan treated it like a puzzle to be solved. He mapped corridors in his head. He learned which passages were guarded and which were forgotten. On the 3rd day, he found the archives. They were located in a basement level that most Syreth had forgotten existed. The entrance was guarded by a single archivist, a male named Torek, who had clearly been assigned to this duty as punishment for some past failure. Nathan approached him with a bow. "I am looking for historical records of border conflicts, specifically attack patterns in the outer colonies over the last 500 years. Torek stared at him. "You are the human." "Yes. Why would a human care about our history?" Nathan smiled. "Because I think something is wrong. The attack on the colony does not match Vorn tactics. I want to know what it does match." Torek was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and let Nathan enter. They worked together for 3 days. Torek had been a military analyst before his disgrace. He had questioned a general's strategy during a minor campaign and been stripped of his rank for the insult. Now he spent his days organizing files that no one would ever read. Until Nathan arrived. Together, they analyzed decades of border skirmish reports. They mapped attack patterns, timing, ship signatures, and communication intercepts. They worked through the nights, sleeping in shifts, eating when they remembered. On the 4th day, Nathan found it. The attacks originated from dead zones in Syrith space, regions that the Dominion had abandoned centuries ago after a plague wiped out their populations. No one patrolled these areas. No one watched them. They were blind spots in the Empire's vision. Someone was using those blind spots. Someone was launching attacks and then retreating into territory that no one bothered to monitor. And the ship signatures did not match the Vorn Collective. They matched old Syrith designs, military vessels that had been officially decommissioned generations ago. Nathan sat back and stared at his findings. "It is not the Vorn. It never was." Torek nodded slowly. "A faction, exiles, warlords who fled the Empire during the purges 3 centuries ago. We thought they had died in the outer reaches. They survived. They built a fleet. And now they are trying to start a war that will destroy both sides so they can claim the ruins." Nathan gathered his evidence and went to find Kira. She was leaving a council session when he intercepted her. Her face was tired and frustrated. The council was not listening to her arguments for restraint. "I found something," Nathan said quietly. "Something important." He showed her the data. Kira read it 3 times, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to cold fury. "This changes everything," she whispered. "Yes, but they will not listen to me. I am human. I am nothing." Kira took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him willingly. Then we will make them listen, she said, together. She smuggled his report to Admiral Venn, a practical military leader who cared more about results than politics. Venn launched a reconnaissance mission into the dead zones. They found exactly what Nathan predicted. A hidden fleet. A colony of exiled warlords who had spent 3 centuries nursing their hatred. The evidence was undeniable. The Council could not ignore it. But by the time they understood the truth, the warlords had already learned they were exposed. And they decided that if their plan was ruined, they would take the entire Dominion down with them. The warlords struck at dawn. They had hidden in the dead zones for 3 centuries, building ships, training soldiers, waiting for the perfect moment. When Admiral Venn exposed their existence, they knew their careful plan was ruined. So they abandoned caution and chose violence instead. 50 warships emerged from hiding and attacked the Cyrith capital fleet while it was still mobilizing. Admiral Venn died in the first 10 minutes, his flagship torn apart by weapons that should not have existed. The defense grid around the homeworld flickered and failed as saboteurs planted decades ago finally revealed themselves. Kira watched the battle from the palace observation deck. Ships burned in the sky like falling stars. Communication channels filled with screaming and static and silence. The greatest military force in the quadrant was being torn apart by an enemy they have forgotten existed. Nathan stood beside her, his face unreadable. He watched the destruction with the same calm expression he wore when reading supply reports. Only his hands betrayed him. They were clenched so tight that his knuckles had turned white. "They are faster than us," Kira said. "They know exactly where to strike. They have been studying us for generations." "Yes," Nathan agreed. "They understand Cyrith tactics perfectly. That is their advantage and their weakness." Before she could ask what he meant, an explosion rocked the palace. The warlords had landed ground troops. They were coming for the council. Kira grabbed Nathan's arm and pulled him toward the emergency passages. They ran through corridors that had not been used in centuries, guided by ancient maps that Torek had shown them during their research. Behind them, they heard weapons fire and screaming. They reached the council chamber just as the last defensive line fell. The High Council, 12 of the most powerful Cyrith in existence, huddled behind a barricade of overturned furniture. Half of them were wounded. One was dead. Councillor Mera, the eldest surviving member, looked up as Kira entered. "Ambassador, you should not be here. This battle is lost." "The battle is not over yet," Kira said. "We need to evacuate. There are ships in the lower hangar that can reach the secondary fleet." Mera shook her head. "The secondary fleet is scattered across 12 systems. By the time they assemble, the homeworld will have fallen. The warlords will control everything. They will offer surrender terms that strip us of our honor. Then refuse them. Fight." "With what?" Mera gestured at the chaos around them. "Our generals are dead or trapped. Our admirals are burning in their ships. We have no one left who can command a fleet." Every eye in the room turned to him, and most of those eyes held contempt. He was human. He was nothing. He was the insult they had tolerated because of political necessity. "I can help," he said. Mera laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "You, a logistics officer? You cannot even understand our battle language." "I understand enough. I understand that your fleet is not destroyed. It is scattered. I understand that the warlords expected a quick victory, and every hour that passes makes their position weaker. I understand that you have been fighting the same way for 10,000 years, and your enemy knows every move you will make before you make it." He paused, letting his words settle over the room. "But they do not know how humans fight. They have never seen it. They cannot prepare for it." Councillor Veth, a younger member who had survived by hiding under bodies, sneered at him. "And how do humans fight?" by dying quickly. Nathan met his gaze without flinching. We fight dirty, we fight unfair, we fight in ways that make no sense, until suddenly we have won, and our enemies are wondering what happened. He turned to Mara. I am not asking for glory. I am not asking for command. I am asking you one question. Do you want to survive, or do you want to be right? The question hung in the air, like smoke from a distant fire. Mara studied him for a long moment. She was 300 years old, a veteran of wars that Nathan could not imagine. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched her friends die in battles that history had already forgotten. She should have dismissed him. She should have laughed at his arrogance. Instead, she asked a question of her own. Why? Why would a human risk his life for our people? This is not your war. This is not your home. You could escape right now and return to Earth. Your species would survive even if ours did not. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Kira. When I married her, I made a promise. Not just words, not just politics. A real promise. Her people became my people. Her enemies became my enemies. That is what marriage means to me. Kira felt something shift inside her chest. She had spent 6 months treating their arrangement as a burden, a duty, a prison she could not escape. She had never once considered that Nathan might feel differently. Mayra saw the look that passed between them. Something ancient and tired softened in her eyes. Very well, she said. I am authorizing provisional command of the combined fleet to Nathan Cole, human. You will operate under the oversight of Ambassador Velthani. If you fail, we die. If you betray us, your entire species will pay the price. Understood. They escaped through the lower passages, fighting their way to the hangar, where a single transport waited. Torek was already there, having fled the archives when the attack began. He had saved as much data as he could carry, including fleet positions and communication codes. As their ship lifted off, Nathan began sending orders to the scattered Syreth forces. The messages were short and strange. Retreat here. Regroup there. Abandon this system. Defend that corridor. The Syreth captains who received these orders were confused and angry. They were warriors, trained to attack, to dominate, to overwhelm their enemies with superior force. Nathan told them to run, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the Syreth Dominion listened to a human. The war was about to enter a new phase, one that nobody expected. The Syreth had always believed that war was a test of strength. The stronger fleet won. The braver warriors survived. Honor was measured in direct confrontation, in meeting your enemy face to face and proving your superiority through force. Nathan believed something different. War, he understood, was a problem, and problems had solutions. Sometimes those solutions were ugly. Sometimes they required patience. Sometimes they required doing things that warriors would consider shameful. Nathan did not care about shame. He cared about winning. His first order confused everyone. He commanded the scattered Syreth fleet to abandon the outer colonies and retreat to 3 specific systems. These systems formed a triangle in space, each one connected to the others by narrow navigation corridors that large fleets could not pass through quickly. The Warlord fleet, led by Exarch Dravon, celebrated. They captured 12 systems in the first week. They broadcast messages of triumph across every frequency. They declared that the Dominion was broken and would soon fall completely. Nathan let them celebrate. He let them spread their forces across their new territory. He let them feel confident. Meanwhile, he worked. He studied the Warlord fleet's movements. He analyzed their supply lines. He calculated exactly how much fuel and ammunition they consumed each day. He learned their communication patterns, their shift schedules, their maintenance routines. Torek helped him translate Syreth tactical data. Kira helped him communicate with suspicious captains, who did not trust human orders. Slowly, painfully, they built a picture of the enemy that no one had ever assembled before. The warlords had strength, but they had weaknesses too. They had spent 3 centuries hiding, which meant they had limited industrial capacity. They could not replace ships quickly. Every vessel they lost was gone forever. The Dominion, despite its losses, still had shipyards, still had factories, still had the economic power of 10,000 worlds behind it. Nathan did not need to destroy the warlord fleet. He needed to make it too expensive for them to continue fighting. His first strike came 3 weeks after taking command. A small squadron of Cyrith ships appeared near a warlord supply depot. They did not attack the depot directly. Instead, they destroyed the communication relays that connected it to the main fleet. For 6 hours, the depot was blind and deaf. During those 6 hours, Nathan's real attack force swept through and eliminated every transport ship carrying fuel and ammunition to the warlord front lines. Drevon lost 12 supply ships without losing a single combat vessel. It seemed like a minor victory, but Nathan knew better. The warlord fleet had just lost 1 month of fuel reserves. They would have to slow their advance or risk running dry in enemy territory. They slowed. Nathan struck again and again. He never attacked the warships directly. He attacked the things that kept warships running. Fuel depots, ammunition factories, communication relays, hospital ships carrying wounded soldiers back for treatment. The Cyrith captains were horrified. This was not honorable warfare. This was cowardice. They demanded to fight properly, to meet the enemy in decisive battle. Nathan refused. "You want to die gloriously," he told them during one particularly heated argument. "I want to win quietly. Your way gets more of our people killed, my way gets more of their people killed. Choose." They chose survival, reluctantly, angrily, but they chose. Exarch Drevon grew frustrated. His fleet was powerful, but it was starving. His soldiers were brave, but they were tired. Every time he tried to force a decisive battle, the Cyrith forces melted away, refusing to engage. It was maddening. It was dishonorable. It was exactly what Nathan wanted. The turning point came at the Veiled Nebula. The nebula was a massive cloud of gas and dust that blocked sensors and disrupted communications. Ships that entered it were effectively blind. The Cyrith had always avoided it for exactly that reason. Nathan saw it differently. He saw an opportunity. He spread rumors that the Dominion's main fleet was regrouping inside the nebula. He allowed a warlord scout ship to capture communication fragments that suggested a vulnerable target. Drevon took the bait. He committed his entire remaining fleet to a strike through the nebula. 42 warships, everything he had left, plunging into the sensor-blind chaos to destroy the Dominion once and for all. They found nothing. The fleet Nathan had advertised did not exist. It was a trick, a lie, a carefully constructed deception. What did exist were 300 mining drones, reprogrammed to attach themselves to any ship that passed through specific coordinates. The drones were not weapons. They could not destroy warships, but they could disable engines. They could seal gun ports. They could turn deadly warships into helpless floating targets. Drevon's fleet emerged from the nebula to find Nathan's real forces waiting for them. 30 Cyrith warships, fully armed, fully supplied, facing 42 enemy vessels that could barely maneuver. Nathan opened a communication channel. "Exarch Drevon, your fleet is disabled. Your supply lines are destroyed. Your hidden colonies have been located and blockaded. You have no path to victory." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I offer you surrender terms. Your soldiers will be exiled to the far reaches of known space. They will keep their lives and their ships. They will never return to Dominion territory. This offer will not be repeated." Drevon's face appeared on the screen. He was old, scarred, filled with 3 centuries of hatred. He had spent his entire life dreaming of this moment, of destroying the empire that had cast out his ancestors. He would not surrender, not to the Dominion, and certainly not to a human. "My people do not yield," he said. "We fight to the last." Nathan nodded. "Then you will die to the last. I am sorry." He closed the channel and gave the order to attack. The battle lasted 4 hours. The warlord crews fought bravely, desperately, knowing they had no chance of survival. They managed to destroy 7 Cyrith ships before the end. When it was over, Nathan sat alone in the command center. The screens around him showed burning wreckage and casualty reports. Thousands more who would never see their families again. Kira found him there, staring at nothing. "You won," she said. "Yes. You do not look happy." Nathan turned to face her. His eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I never wanted this," he said quietly. "I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to help people. Instead, I learned how to kill more efficiently than anyone else." He looked back at the casualty reports. Someone had to do it. Someone had to end this before it destroyed everything. But that does not mean I have to celebrate. Kira sat beside him. She did not speak. She simply stayed, sharing the weight of what he had done. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. The war was ending, but the cost would be remembered forever. The war ended, not with celebration, but with exhaustion. The warlord fleet was destroyed. The hidden colonies were captured. The survivors were exiled to the outer reaches of the galaxy, so far from civilized space that they would never threaten anyone again. The Cyrith Dominion had survived, wounded and weakened, but alive. The Vorn Collective, watching from the borders, had seen everything. They had seen a human take command of an alien fleet and win a war that should have been unwinnable. They had seen tactics that no one in the galaxy had ever used before. They chose peace. Formal negotiations began within weeks. Treaties were signed. Borders were established. For the first time in 2 centuries, the guns fell silent. Nathan watched the signing ceremony from the back of the room. He wore the same simple uniform he had worn on his wedding day. No medals, no decorations, nothing to suggest that he had just saved an empire. Kira stood beside him, her formal robes glittering with the honors that her people had bestowed upon her. She was a hero now, the ambassador who had trusted a human when no one else would. "They want to give you a title," she said quietly. "Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, a seat on the High Council, a palace of your own." Nathan shook his head. "I do not want any of that. I know, I told them. They do not understand. They will learn." The ceremony ended with applause and cheering. Delegates from 100 worlds shook hands and made promises they might or might not keep. The future was uncertain, but it was a future. That was more than anyone had expected a few months ago. Counselor Mara approached them as the crowds began to disperse. She moved slowly now, the stress of the war having aged her decades and months. But her eyes were still sharp. "Nathan Cole," she said, "the Council wishes to express its gratitude. You have saved our people. Name your reward, and it will be granted." Nathan considered for a moment. 2 things. First, I want permanent diplomatic status for Torek. He served with distinction. His disgrace should be forgotten. Mara nodded. "Granted. And the second? A small ship, fast enough to outrun trouble, comfortable enough for 2. I want to take my wife traveling." The counselor stared at him. She had expected demands for power, for territory, for the kind of rewards that conquerors always demanded. Instead, he asked for a ship. "You could rule an empire," she said. "You could be the most powerful human in history. Why refuse? Nathan smiled. It was the same calm, steady smile he had worn when Kira first met him. The smile of a man who knew exactly who he was. I never wanted to command a war, he said. I wanted to end one. Those are different things. My job is done. Now I want to go home. Mayra studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that no Sireth counselor had ever done to a human before. She bowed. You have my respect, Nathan Cole. The Dominion will remember what you did for us. I do not need to be remembered, Nathan said. I need my wife to be happy. Everything else is extra. He took Kira's hand and walked out of the ceremony hall. Behind them, the most powerful beings in the galaxy watched them leave. Some were confused, some were relieved. A few, the wisest ones, understood. Power was a trap. Nathan had seen it capture countless people throughout history. Generals who could not stop fighting. Politicians who could not stop scheming. Leaders who forgot why they wanted to lead in the first place. He refused to become one of them. The ship they were given was called the Wanderer. It was small and fast and perfect. Nathan spent a week modifying its systems while Kira said goodbye to her family. Her mother, who had disapproved of the marriage from the beginning, admitted that perhaps she had been wrong. He is strange, her mother said, but strange is sometimes exactly what we need. They left the Sireth homeworld on a quiet morning. No crowds, no ceremonies, just two people starting a new chapter together. Their first destination was Earth. Nathan had not been home in years. He wanted to show Kira the mountains where he grew up, the rivers where he learned to fish, and the small colony school where he first discovered that he was good at solving problems. After Earth, they traveled to the frontier colonies, the places where the next generation of human Sireth cooperation was being built. New settlements, new partnerships, new possibilities. Nathan returned to logistics work. He helped colonies establish supply networks. He trained administrators in efficiency methods. He solved the small problems that no one else wanted to think about. Kira wrote a diplomatic treatise that would reshape how the Dominion viewed its allies. She argued that strength was not measured in warships alone, that different species had different gifts, that the future belonged to those who could learn from each other. It became required reading in Sireth academies. Years passed. The galaxy changed. New conflicts arose and were resolved. New alliances formed and dissolved. The endless cycle of history continued as it always had. But something was different now. Humans were no longer seen as children. They were partners, allies, perhaps even friends. When historians later studied the war, they struggled to categorize Nathan Cole. He was not a general in any traditional sense. He did not seek glory or conquest. He did not build monuments or demand statues. He had simply seen a problem that no one else could solve. And he had solved it. Some historians called him a genius. Others called him lucky. A few called him a fraud who had stumbled into success. But the Sireth who had served under him knew the truth. They had seen him work through the night, studying enemy patterns until his eyes burned. They had seen him refuse to sacrifice soldiers for minor victories. They had seen him carry the weight of every death on his shoulders without breaking. He was not a hero in the way that stories usually described heroes. He was something more difficult to understand. He was a man who cared. About people, about problems, about doing things right instead of doing things fast. And that, they concluded, was the most human thing of all. She had spent years watching him, learning him, falling in love with him in ways she had never expected. One evening on a small colony world at the edge of known space, she asked him the question she had been carrying since the beginning. Do you regret it? The war? The killing? Everything you had to do? Nathan was quiet for a long time. They were sitting on a hillside, watching twin suns set over an ocean that no Seraph had ever seen before. "I regret that it was necessary," he said finally. "I regret that there was no other way. But I do not regret doing it, because if I had refused, millions more would have died. Sometimes the best choice is still a terrible choice. You just have to make it anyway." He turned to look at her. The last light of the suns caught his eyes, making them glow like distant stars. "I would do it again. For you, for your people, for the future we are building together. That is what love means to me." Kira leaned against him, feeling his warmth, his steadiness, his quiet strength. "You really are a strange human," she said. Nathan laughed. "Yes, but you married me anyway." "I did," she smiled, "and I would do it again." The sun set, the stars emerged, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a new day was beginning.